Okay, good to see you all. I hope everyone's healthy. We're going to start with some prayers as Anna is our host today. She's put up already. So as my brother's answering machine used to say, you know what to do. Sangye churang soki nam la changchu baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunen gipe sognam ki rola benche sange drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, which is one of our main activities here. We're listening to the teachings, we're contemplating and meditating on it. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all wandering beings, all migrating beings, all droa. Sangye chodang soki chognam la, changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki, drola penche sangye drupa sho. Saji poki, jugshing meto, Tram ri rab ling ji ni de gen padi sange shindu mikte uwagi drokunam dakshin la Chupasho. And you may know when you offer the mandala, it's standard practice to visualize not only just one mandala, say our world system, but thousands and thousands and thousands of other world systems. We usually say what Edward Conset coined the term trichiliocosm. So 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000, which is 1,000,000,000 sort of similar mandalas. And on every atom of those mandalas are another trichiliocosm of mandalas that you're offering. So coming from the prayer of Samantabhadra, the way to make Samantabhadra offerings and so forth. And then requesting our primordial guru, O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Thank you. So, hi, a couple more people arrived. Anna, Yeshid, Mikhail, Paul, Suvansh. So we're going to begin with a little meditation as usual. Relax your body if it needs to be relaxed. Sometimes when you're really at the beginning, let's say, of an all-day retreat or something, you can even scan your whole body to make sure all the muscles are relaxed. Relax your mind. Preliminary relaxation is just to remind yourself, I don't have to think about anything else now. Grocery lists, any phone calls or anything. I can deal with all of that later. Recognize your breathing and place your mindfulness on the inhalation and exhalation, recognizing simply when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out, and whether it is a long or a short breath. And if you had some success in that, you could turn your attention to the conventional nature of the mind by first observing the mental consciousness. If you've had success in this before, you can immediately go to a remembering consciousness of this clear light nature. Much more subtle than the observation of the breathing. You can start off with just a clarity of the mind, the lack of conceptual elaborations, as we were talking before class. But in particular, recognizing within this clarity, there is a conventional Buddha nature, the developmental Buddha nature, the lack of any obstruction to the arisal of thoughts within it, lack of any obstruction to their leaving. Which we have, not only we, but all living beings have. But we're in the unique situation of being able to recognize it right now and rejoice in it, feel joy in it, because we have this auspicious moment of leisure and endowment that the Buddha praised so many times. Whatever else is happening to us, whatever aches and pains or ups and downs are going on in our life, we have the opportunity to practice the Dharma, which has come about because of our own effort in previous lives, creating the causes of this life of leisure and endowment. And rather than letting it be wasted as we have done when we've had it in the past numberless times through the numberless rebirths in the past, when we've squandered it on just worldly attainments, to look at the big picture and to use this opportunity to at least create the causes for happiness in future lives as a practitioner of lowest scope, or more nobly to escape from cyclic existence completely, to achieve nirvana, work for that this lifetime or within the next 16 lifetimes as a practitioner of intermediate scope. But as the Buddha advised us, if we were intelligent and had energy, not to be satisfied with his Hinayana teachings, his lesser vehicle, but to use this opportunity to enter into his great vehicle, the Mahayana, that brings us to the great destination of enlightenment and is big enough vehicle to take all sentient beings to that destination. The reasoning for doing that, for including them, is to recognize they've all been our mother numberless times and have been depthlessly kind. They are completely equal with us also, from another point of view, wanting to be free of suffering and wanting to be happy. Developing great compassion for them, seeing their suffering by meditating on the suffering of the lower realms, the general sufferings of samsara and so forth. Wanting to help them escape from suffering, even small suffering this lifetime. We strive with whatever skillful means we have to alleviate their suffering with Dharma advice now, but knowing to really help them escape from cyclic existence and eventually achieve enlightenment. We ourselves have to become enlightened. From that position, from the position of enlightenment, we can effortlessly, without conceptions, effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error, lead sentient beings on the paths that take them wherever they're starting from, over how many lifetimes it might take, lead them to actual enlightenment. To reach that state of enlightenment, we have to achieve enlightenment. We have to collect the two. We have to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. Merit that brings about our form bodies, Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya. Collection of wisdom that brings about our wisdom body, the Dharmakaya. As we are only beginners in the path, we need to be educated about how to achieve those collections, how to accumulate them, which is explained in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, elaborated on in particular by Nagarjuna, Buddhapalita, Bhavaviveka, Chandrakirti, Shantideva, and so forth, and especially by Lama Khapa in the Gompa Rapsal. I think I'm going to participate in the class today, listening, hearing the words, understanding their meaning, contemplating, trying to clear up the exact meaning of the phrases, and meditating, meaning once we've come to a clear understanding and a conclusion, the taste of the meaning of those words, to hold that single-pointedly. I'm going to participate this morning in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, especially now our enemies, as we're practicing, eventually equanimous toward all. But right now, because our enemies are those that we try to tend not to think about or to not wish well, but to particularly now recognizing how they've been our mother numberless times in the past. They will be our dearest friend and mother again in the future while we remain in cyclic existence. I'm going to participate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So thank you. Bring your attention back to the present. So we have a couple people off. Jennifer and Snehi are attending in person at the Shantideva Center today with Geshe Tenzin Sopa's teachings there. They'll catch up with the videos. I suppose some other people are also, there may be some others. Yeah, so we're a little bit fewer today. And I think David and his wife are traveling up to Ohio to see their families and so forth. So how are we doing? Any questions? Any residual doubts or any general Dharma questions that you have that have been vexing you before we begin? So, no, okay, that's interesting. So, so Nadine, when we talk about benefiting sentient beings, if you think of sentient being as the generality, then each and every sentient being is a particular of that, right? Okay, so you have a set sentient being. If you just talk about, I'm going to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. Sentient beings is the generality. So in order to recognize sentient beings, you have to recognize their particularities, their instances, all the elements of sentient being. So when we help one sentient being, as that's an instance of sentient beings, are we helping all sentient beings, Nadine?
Yes, if we are doing it in the frame of the Bodhisattva vow with the Mahayana motivation, then it will lead to enlightenment, and that is why it benefits all sentient beings.
Yeah. So when we're working for one sentient, say we see a dog that's got a thorn in its paw, or kitty cat, or a bird that's hurt its wing or smashed against our window and is sort of writhing around on the ground. Should we aim just to help that sentient being, that instance of the generality sentient beings?
Yes.
Right. We should try to help them, but with what state of mind are we thinking of them in particular?
Yes.
Yeah. So if it were to become, if we can think of that as benefiting all sentient beings as we're doing that, like in the same way when you're washing the dishes from the mind training, you think, just like this, as your scrub pad is taking off the spaghetti from the plate or whatever, the chow mein, just like this, may I eliminate the delusions within the minds of all sentient beings, within my own mind and within the mind of all sentient beings. So you can think as you're maybe trying to get the thorn out of the kitty cat's paw, just like this, may I eliminate the suffering from all sentient beings' minds. So immediately then you are thinking of the class of all sentient beings while you're doing that action. So you're doing it for the sake of all sentient beings. So different ways to think when we're practicing, these various, when we
Thank
try
you
to,
so much.
yeah, when we try to
Thank
practice
you.
various bodhisattva activities. So, okay. So we are going to start today. We left off last time. We're in Thupten Jinpa's text, if you have the hardbound, 202, page 202, in the FPMT translation that Venerable Joan did on page 106. We're in the outline, the third outline here, refuting using the consequence, this reading from Jinpa's text, refuting using the consequence that in both situations its perceptibility, and lack thereof would be the same, or as Venerable Joan translated on page 106, about in the middle of the page. It says, since it follows that both would be similarly apprehended and not apprehended on each of the two occasions, refuting, and then in parentheses, that the two, cause and effect, are one entity. So, and Jinpa's to try to see how those two are talking about the same thing, right? Jinpa's saying refuting. So what is he refuting there, Mikhail? In that outline when it says refuting.
Yeah, he's refuting the fact that when you see the effect, you can't see the cause. But if they were really one entity, then the cause would be visible at the same time of the effect.
So what are we refuting?
That they are one entity.
Right. So the very last phrase in Venerable Jones' translation, refuting, and then she has in parentheses, that's what's missing in Jinpa's, the sort of what's inferred here by the refutation, refuting that the two, cause and result, cause and effect, are one entity. That's the Samkhya position, that they have this, that they're part of this prakriti, general principle, and therefore they are, that cause and effect would be one entity. So Jinpa's text translates verse 611 like this. If for you, that's referring to the Samkhyas, if for you the seed is not different from the sprout before us, okay, you Samkhyas say that they have the same entity. One is the cause, the seed is the cause, the sprout is the result. If for you the seed is not different from the sprout before us, then just like the seed, what you call the sprout would be invisible. What does that mean? So when the sprout is there, what you call the sprout, when the sprout comes, the seed is no longer visible, right? So like that, if they're the same entity, the sprout should also be invisible. Or, next line, being identical, just like the sprout, the seed too should be perceived. So on the other hand, if the sprout is visible, then the seed should also be visible. And you might say that there's some remnant of the seed in the ground. We're talking about the whole seed as it was before the sprout came. And then the last line, thus you should not uphold this thesis. And then Jinpa has in parentheses, what's the thesis? Of identity of cause and effect. Venerable Joan translates, if for you the seed and the sprout are not different here, the seed and likewise the sprout would not be apprehended. So that means they would be the same in not being apprehended, or alternatively, due to their being one, in the case of the sprout, likewise, that seed would also be apprehended. Because of that, this is not to be asserted. So that means this thesis, this idea that the cause and effect are one entity. Following, more or less? Some of you have read ahead, so you may have clearer understanding. If you're just sort of listening, reading it now, maybe not so clear. So then that's just the Karaka. Generally, in Lama Tsongkhapa's text, he doesn't quote the verse. He just immediately gives the commentary. And Thupten Jinpa and Venerable Joan and so forth, other authors, have added in the Karika for us to see what he's talking about. Otherwise, we wouldn't know. So Jinpa's text continues, there are other faults as well. So we've talked about other faults that refute the Samkhya idea of was it? Self-generation, self-production, self-birth, whatever you want to call it, self-arising, arising from self, as though the sprout, when it has arisen, oh, what's that? I must have said some keyword that. Did you see that?
I believe there's a setting for like, if you do this, then it recognizes it and does an animation. Something like that. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's fireworks. We're happening that. So the thesis of the Samkhya's is one that the sprout has. Okay, now we're getting a different. The sprout has arisen from itself, as though the sprout already existed before, and that's what we've been refuting with other logical arguments. Now it says there are other faults. That's referring to this stanza that we just read as well. With regard to the realities of the seed and the sprout, the natures of the seed and the sprout, if for you the seed is not different from the sprout, so this is talking to the Samkhya's, right? If for you, Samkhya's, the seed is not different from the sprout before us, that means you're put my thumb out of the window here. The sprout has arisen and it's before us. If the seed is not different from the sprout before us, then just like the seed cannot be perceived at the time of the sprout, just in the same way that the seed cannot be perceived at the time of the sprout because it's disintegrated, likewise, what you call the sprout would also have to be invisible, because if you say that their realities are the same, what was that first line? With regard to the realities of the seed and the sprout, if for you the seed is not different from the sprout, before us, then just like the seed that cannot be perceived at the time of the sprout, in the same way, what you call the sprout would also be invisible, even though supposedly it's there in front of you. The term "or" in the sentence, so that refers back to the root text, where it said, if for you the seed is not different from the sprout before us, then just like the seed, what you call the sprout would be invisible, or actually that "or" comes at the end of the second line in the Tibetan. But anyway, so this is another way of looking at it. The term "or" indicates that alternatively, being identical in all respects, the seed and the sprout are identical in all respects, just like the sprout is visible to us, the seed should be perceived by the senses at the time of the sprout, if they were identical in all ways. Since this is not so, you who wish to avert these two faults should not uphold this thesis, the thesis that there is no distinction between the realities of the seed and the sprout, that the seed and the sprout are the same nature. Makes sense? Savansh, what do you think? It must not. You put up both thumbs. We didn't see the fireworks. I don't know what happens. Yashay, making sense?
Partially.
So it actually sounds like simple argument. Put my fists up. If the seed and the sprout that is its effect were the same nature, sort of in all ways, then if the sprout were to be visible, then the seed should be visible. Or in the case of the sprout having arisen and the seed is no longer visible, because they're the same nature, the seed and the sprout, then the sprout should also be invisible. So throwing these consequences at the samkhya. Richard, what do you think? Does it sound okay? Making sense? You're thinking. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Even though it looks like you're unmuted, it may be that your microphone is not connected. Okay, yeah. Can't hear you yet. Can't hear you. Okay. Play around. If you look in the Zoom settings for for audio, it may be it's set to a different input source. Anyway, okay. We'll let you figure that out for a while. Okay. So just to read what Venerable Jones said there, again, it's quite similar. There's also another fault. There are further faults. If, as for you, the two entities of seed and sprout are not different entities here in the world, if they're not different, that means if they're the same, samkhya position, just as on the occasion of the sprout, when the seed is not apprehended, right? When the sprout is there, the seed is not apprehended any longer, it's not perceived. Likewise, the sprout should not be apprehended because the seed is not apprehended. They're the same in all ways. Or alternatively, just the opposite way, we say on the other hand, what do we say in English? On the other hand, since the entities of those seed and sprout are one in all ways, just as on the occasion of the sprout, that sprout itself is apprehended, likewise, the seed would also have to be apprehended by the sense consciousnesses. Because of that not existing, because that's not the case, these two errors are asserted to be abandoned. So Jimpus translates that, you who wish to avert these two faults. Venerable Jones says, because of that, these two errors are asserted to be abandoned. You know, asserted is this word dupa, which means here, if you wish to abandon them, therefore, the entities of the two, the seed and the sprout, should not be asserted as being the same. The entities of the two, the seed and the sprout, are not different, is not to be asserted. So you have to sort of juggle the words around there to get the idea. Making sense? Richard, did you get your sound back?
Testing.
Yeah, we're back. Okay.
Hey, okay, good. Yeah, it's making sense. It's just that what's striking for me is that this seems like the nature of the reality being asserted by the Samkhya's is just so simplistic that it seems very easy to refute. It just doesn't seem like anything that makes sense in regards to modern science, for example. I mean, there's something about it that's just overly simplistic for me and makes it very easy to refute.
Right. If Snehi were here, she would probably defend the Samkhya. She would say it's in accord with modern physics, because I think she's
no, not quite. I mean,
okay,
yeah, but I mean, it's just a more complicated thing. Reality is much more complicated, either conventional or ultimate. It just doesn't parse like this, at least not for me.
Right. Even though it seems obvious, it has to be refuted to the mind explicitly, because our goal is eventually to be able to refute production.
Right.
Production can only take place in these four ways: from self, from other, from both or neither, meaning causelessly. And we have to reach certainty about that. That's why these reasons are being given to now refute that position of self-generation. Okay, good. So the text continues in Jinpa's translation. If one understands these forms of reasoning well, that means all of the reasonings that we've had refuting the Samkhya position, okay? If one understands these forms of reasoning well, all misconceptions, such as the view that while all phenomena are distinct realities with relation to each other, the ultimate natures of all are mutually inclusive of each other and are in fact one, comma, the view that the ultimate nature of a thing's earlier state is itself the ultimate nature of its later state, and so on, will be avoided. Is that one sentence? That's one long sentence, right? So, as one of my professors in college used to say, teaching physics, he would fill up the blackboard. I think I've told you this before. There were 3 big blackboards at the front of this auditorium, filling up these equations, physics, first blackboard, then the second one, huge ones, and the third one. And then at the end, he's brushing off the chalk from his hands, intuitively obvious to the most casual observer, right? So what's he talking about here? What's Lama? So who can parse this? Mikhail, can you parse that statement? Sort of give us the gist of what he's saying there?
I think there are 2 main statements that can be avoided first.
Okay, so what's the thing about being avoided? What is that talking about? If one understands the forms of reasoning, and then all misconceptions, and then going to the very end will be avoided.
Yeah, all misconceptions, such as, and he's giving 2 examples of wrong assertions.
Okay, and what are they?
The first one is that while all phenomena are different, at the same time, they have the same ultimate nature.
At the same time, they have what?
The same ultimate nature.
Right.
Yeah. That's the first.
And in fact are one. That's a crucial thing here. So is this talking about misconceptions of the Samkhyas or misconceptions of Buddhists?
I think that's how the Samkhyas think.
Okay. Paul, what do you think? Is this refuting particularly misconceptions of the Samkhyas or misconceptions of Buddhists and other non-Samkhyas, other non-Buddhists?
I would, my gut reaction would simply be that he's refuting the Samkhyas, but I was just sitting here trying to read Thupten Jinpa's footnote on this sentence to see exactly what he said.
Good point. Okay, so let's look at that footnote. That's 373. So it says, Tsongkhapa here, Tsongkhapa is here drawing our attention to the need for a refined approach to understanding the intricacies of reasoning involved in critiquing the Samkhya thesis of self-arising. A key element is to understand what is meant by things being identical in nature, which in the Tibetan is ngo chikpa. So ngo is something that we run across in the Buddhist terminology, but also the Samkhya have their own meaning of that. But essentially it means nature. Ngo chikpa, chik means one or same, or in this case, identical. So if 2 things are ngo chikpa or ngo chik, that means they're the same nature or identical in nature. A key element is to understand what is meant by things being identical in nature and how, while being identical in nature, that's the Samkhya position, right? two entities can yet possess conceptually distinct identities. Remember, they said that although they have the same, they're the same in Prakriti, they are different when they're manifested. So being identical in nature does not entail being identical in all respects. Then he says again, so it begins so in according to Majjhamaka, emptiness, being the ultimate nature of all things, can be said to be the ultimate nature of two entirely separate entities, such as a vase and a flower, or if you like, a vase and a flower. I remember seeing some I don't know, sitcom or something on TV once where someone said in the bar, they said a vase, and they said, what are you talking? It's a vase, you know, and so as though you're trying to use highfalutin words, calling vase a vase. So anyway, so according to Majjhamaka, emptiness being the ultimate nature of all things can be said to be the ultimate nature of two entirely separate entities, such as a vase and a flower. So, yeah, so the emptiness of my mug, the nature, the ultimate nature of my mug is emptiness, and the ultimate nature of my glasses is also emptiness. Emptiness being the ultimate nature of all things can be said to be ultimate nature of two entirely separate entities, such as a vase and a flower. Nonetheless, this does not mean that the emptiness of the vase is the emptiness of that flower, and vice versa. What does that mean, Richard? Is the emptiness of a vase, although the ultimate nature of the vase and the ultimate nature of the flower are both emptiness, is the emptiness of the vase the same as the emptiness of the flower?
No.
Why not?
Why not? Because one is the because one is the emptiness of a vase, and the other is the emptiness of a flower. There's no overarching emptinessosity to them. They're each separate emptinesses, and the emptiness of the vase disappears when the vase disappears, but the emptiness of the flower is still there.
Okay, good. So that's a good point. What was that word you said? There was some sort of new word you coined there. The emptiness.
Emptinosity.
Emptinosity. Okay, that's good.
Emptinosity. We speak of emptiness in a general way, but there's only emptiness of a specific, of a specific object or phenomena.
Right.
Yeah. So they're not the same. I had a question though.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Tell me your question.
The question is, that's on the ultimate level, but isn't it also the case on the conventional level as well? Both a vase and a flower are comprised of electrons. So in that sense, they're the same nature. On a conventional level, they're comprised of atoms or electrons and protons and neutrons and what have you. But in fact, they are not the same in all respects, because the arrangement of the protons and electrons, et cetera, are different and specific for the vase and the flower.
Okay, now you're getting into Snehi territory.
No, not at all. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that the Samkhya's are right. What I'm saying is that those are different. That what holds for the convention, what holds for the ultimate, also holds for the conventional as well.
So your observation was right on. Let's say, for instance, the emptiness of a pot or a vase. That's a permanent phenomena, right? permanent phenomenon.
Right.
Does that mean it's existed since primordial time?
No, it comes into existence when the vase comes into existence.
Right. And it ceases when the vase no longer exists. Say the vase falls to the floor and is no longer recognized as a vase.
There's only the emptiness of the shards.
Right. So then there's a different emptiness. So that emptiness has a certain duration. And so there is, as you said, there's no overarching emptinosity. There's no overarching emptiness that exists, some like mother lode of emptiness that exists out there. That would be kind of falling into the extreme of solidifying emptiness as being inherently existent.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's finish the sentence there. To assert this, nonetheless, this does not mean that the emptiness of the vase is the emptiness of the flower, or vice versa, that the emptiness of the flower is the emptiness of the vase. To assert this would imply a belief in some kind of unitary, all-pervading mother emptiness, almost inherently existent, that can be conceived as an absolute, as being the one and only emptiness. So that's I think that's a good point by Jimpa there. So if one understands these forms of reasoning well, all misconceptions, such as the view that so here it's not this statement, this paragraph is not just refuting the Samkhya. It's saying that if you understand these refutations of the Samkhya, you can also eliminate other misconceptions about emptiness in the Buddhist context. If you understand these forms of reasoning well, all misconceptions will be avoided. What kind of misconceptions? A misconception such as the view that while all phenomena are distinct realities, could be a Buddhist perception too, that conventionally the vase and the flowers are different with relation to one another. Still, someone might think that the ultimate natures of all are mutually inclusive of one another. That would mean that if it is one, it is the other, that the emptiness of the vase would be the emptiness of the flower. But we've just we're trying to grok that the emptiness of the vase is not the emptiness of the flower, even though in a certain sense, the ultimate nature of the vase is emptiness. The ultimate nature of the flower is emptiness, but the actual specific emptiness of the vase is not the same as the emptiness of the flower. So misconceptions such as the view that while all phenomena are distinct realities, let's say conventionally, with relation to one another, the ultimate natures of all are mutually inclusive of each other and are in fact one, unitary, as Jimbo was saying there. That's one misconception. Another, the view that the ultimate nature of a thing's earlier state is itself the ultimate nature of its later state. So Shanka, where's Shanka? Shanka here?
He's having technical difficulties.
Oh, he's disappeared. Okay, I thought he was here at the beginning.
I believe he was here at the beginning,
Yeah.
George, but it looks like he's fallen off.
Okay, so Rozio, we were what page are we now? Can someone tell Rozio? I don't have the written edition.
202.
202. Okay. So so this is now, he's got a comma there. This is a separate view. The view that the ultimate nature of a thing's earlier state is itself the ultimate nature of its later state. Is that in fact true, Stephen? Is the ultimate nature, let's say, my consciousness, the ultimate nature of one moment of consciousness is, say, the earlier moment of consciousness. Is it the ultimate nature of its later state, the next moment of consciousness?
My answer, Venerable George, is yes and no.
Okay. Okay.
No, because if it's
Just
an
going to leave it.
impermanent
Okay.
phenomenon,
Okay. Go ahead.
it's changing from moment to moment, so the basis is different. So the emptiness is different in the same way that the emptiness of a flower is different from a vase or a emptiness of a vase. But then I would say no, because the emptiness itself from moment to moment or basis to basis is undifferentiable.
Okay. Let's see. Mikhail, what would you say?
You differentiated it based on the vase and the other thing, didn't you?
So Sean jumped in there. I was asking Mikhail. So what did you say, Sean?
I said, isn't he differentiating the emptiness based on those two objects, though?
So
He couldn't differentiate the emptiness.
this is supposed to be a wrong view. This is supposed to be a wrong view, right? A misconception. The view that the ultimate nature of a thing's earlier state this can be interpreted in many different ways. So I say the seed versus the sprout. The earlier state is the seed, the later state is the sprout. Or if you talk about a continuum of consciousness, you have moment A, B, and C. And say A is the moment previous, B is the present moment, C is the next moment. Those are all different, say, conventionally. And so the emptiness of those three moments are also going to be different. So it is a misconception, the view that the ultimate nature of a thing's earlier state is itself the ultimate nature of its later state. That is a misconception. Mikhail, what do you think?
Yeah, but aren't we saying that the emptiness of a thing is a permanent thing, so it is not momentary changing?
Right.
So it should not be different from one moment to the next.
Okay.
I agree with Stephen. Yeah.
This is Stephen's conundrum. Okay. Paul, what do you think? Can you get us out of this conundrum?
Sure, but yeah, because just as the consciousness that's the basis of its emptiness changes moment by moment, every moment by moment is a different permanent emptiness, right? Because the consciousness comes into is momentary. The emptiness that is associated with it, even though it is permanent, is associated with a phenomena that is moment by moment. So from each moment to moment, it's a different emptiness associated with each moment of consciousness. So you can't say that they are the same.
So Sean T. Deva, you notice his screen name up there is quite evocative. Seems to be either his allergies are kicking in or he's. What do you think? You find difficult to believe Paul's assertion there?
That was just making me think of Paul's unclear words.
I can say it in Sanskrit. That'll be even more unclear.
Stephen, what do you think?
Well, I get what Dr. Paul is saying, but then don't we also say that, for example, the emptiness of the mind of a sentient being is undifferentiable from the emptiness of a mind of a Buddha?
They are, we would say, the ultimate nature of the sentient being's mind is the same as the ultimate nature of a Buddha. What is that ultimate nature? Emptiness. They are both empty of inherent existence. But the emptiness of the sentient being's mind is not the emptiness of the Buddha's mind or a Buddha's mind.
Well, the sentient being's mind is not a Buddha's mind. The basis is different.
Right.
But on the ultimate level, the emptiness can't be told apart. So therefore they must be the same. They're indifferentiable. I'd call this.
Yeah.
Just
Maybe I
because
just
you
have to
can't
think
tell
about it.
things apart doesn't that's by that line of reasoning. If I have a drop of water that's pure H2O and another drop of water that's pure H2O, you would be claiming they're the same thing.
They are identical.
They're identical, but they're not the same.
Okay. Anna, what do you think?
George, Venerable George, I'm wondering if it's a good idea to think about your doctor's advice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll take a break in a couple minutes. Okay. It's still 15, 20 minutes. Anna, your blackboard reminds me of that. What was that movie? A Beautiful Mind, the mathematician. I think there was some scene where he had all these equations up on a blackboard like that. So, yeah, Rocio, what do you think?
No. What I was thinking is that then in one thing, many emptiness can coincide, in the sense that in a car, there's the emptiness of the car, but there's also the emptiness of the wheel, like the emptiness of each one of its parts. But also, I was thinking also in the mind or in the consciousness, where you have the emptiness as a whole, and then the emptiness of its particular mental factors or thoughts or things. Are those emptiness the same, like what we were saying? They're not the same, but they're identical.
So they are, that's not exactly what's being talked about here, but yeah, that's interesting. You can say they are all emptiness, and emptiness, if you've realized one emptiness, you are able to realize the emptiness of everything else, but not simply by realizing that one emptiness, in that all other emptinesses are the same. All of the different emptinesses are different. So just to look at the question about the prior state and the later state, remember it says that misconception, such as the view that the ultimate nature of a thing's earlier state is itself the ultimate nature of its later state. So if you talk about previous state and later state, you're talking about a continuum, right? Let's say the continuum of the vase or the vase or the pot, if you want. So let's say if the pot is existing, you've got it on your table, or you've got it on in your Indian train, you got the little clay thing that they put the hot tea in. Hopefully it's been baked and it's not going to fall apart in your hand. It's not always certain on the Indian trains, but so that has a certain continuity. Is there an emptiness of the continuity of that mug, Mikhail?
Because the continuity is a conceptual thing. So
yeah. So is everything else. Everything is imputed by thought, right?
Yeah. So yeah.
Is there a continuity of that mug, that cup, clay cup?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
So there is a continuity. So one instant of the cup gives rise to the next instant of the cup, which itself is the cause of the next instant of the cup. All of them looking the same, all of them looking the same, but are actually different entities, right? But they're part of the continuum. But you can talk about the emptiness of the continuum. Like, say, for instance, we talk about the emptiness of the Buddha's mind is called what? The Buddha, let's say the emptiness of the Buddha's Dharmakaya wisdom Suvash, what is that called, you know? Are you there?
The emptiness of the Buddha's Dharmakaya wisdom.
Yeah.
The Dharma Dhatu.
You could call it Dharma Dhatu, but what's the, so generally when we talk about, sometimes we talk about three bodies, the Rupakaya, we talk about two bodies, the Rupakaya and the Dharmakaya. If we divide the Rupakaya into, let's get my fingers right here. Rupakaya can be divided into Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and then you've got Dharmakaya. But if you divide the Dharmakaya into, Suvash, what are the two Dharmakayas? So that you talk about the four bodies. What are the two Dharmakayas?
Swabhavikaya?
Yeah, the nature body and the wisdom Dharmakaya. So the Dharmakaya can be divided into the wisdom Dharmakaya, which means the conventional omniscient mind that knows all phenomena, right? That's what we usually think of, the omniscient mind. And then its emptiness, that's called the Svavavikakaya or Svavavikaya. So that's just talking about the mind in general, right? That must be talking about the continuity of the Buddha's mind is called the Svavavikakaya. So the Svavavikakaya is permanent, doesn't change from moment to moment, but the Buddha's omniscient mind is impermanent, the wisdom Dharmakaya. And so every instant of that has its own emptiness, which is an instance of Svavavikakaya. Don, what do you think? I can see you're enjoying this.
I'm grokking.
You're grokking.
Yes, but I do follow that
Okay.
there is a continuum, I think, that we can think of in that way.
Okay. Okay, so this seems a little bit of an enigma here for some of us, right? On one hand, you'd like to say that, let's say in the case of the Buddhist mind, the Svavavikakaya, the emptiness of the Buddhist mind is a permanent phenomenon. Yet every instant of the Buddha's omniscient mind is changing, right? It's a conventional phenomena, the omniscient mind of the Buddha. It's changing moment by moment. It's not permanent. Its ultimate nature is permanent. So it seems like a little bit of an enigma there, right? What do you think, Stephen?
Well, yeah, it is an enigma to me. And I'm still thinking about Dr. Paul's analogy, which he kindly shared.
He's so
I don't know. But like if you have two water droplets of pure H2O, I can still differentiate them because there's one over here and then there's one over here.
Right.
But I don't know if I can differentiate a non-affirming negation, the emptiness of inherent existence.
So,
Venerable George, if I may.
Yes.
So there's another simple permanent phenomena that you can think of, which is uncompounded space, right? So there's the uncompounded space of this mug. There's the uncompounded space of this spoon, right? You can make a distinction between the uncompounded space that's coextensive with this spoon, the uncompounded space that's coextensive with this mug, even though the same sort of thing, you can't, don't get confused by location, right? It's just, it's associated with a phenomenon.
So those two spaces, uncompounded spaces, permanent spaces, they are they are actually different, right? They are both space. They are both the lack of obstructing contact. And in case you need a refresher, let's say, let's presume this is a solid piece of aluminum. Actually, it's my Yeti mug, but let's say it has its own space too, even if it's solid aluminum. What is that space, Louise, of this mug? Let's say right now it has space inside. There's some water and then some empty space, but I'm not talking about that. If this was solid aluminum, or let's say this was a rock, a boulder, it would still have space associated with it.
Yes.
In what way?
It wouldn't exist if it didn't have space to exist in. It
Right.
would be, how could you have something without, space is unobstructive. It couldn't have a place or exist if it didn't have, and you move it, now you're a new location.
No. Yeah. It's the space that this occupies.
Yeah, yeah.
That's its uncompounded space.
Mm.
So yeah, so something to think about. So in this context, when Geshe Sopa was teaching, he was quoting a statement that is often erroneously attributed to Aryadeva's 400 stanzas. You remember Aryadeva's commentary on emptiness, the 400 stanzas of I think Ruth Sonam's translation is the 400 stanzas of the yogic activities of bodhisattvas. You could translate the title that way, but usually it's translated, it's just called the 400 stanzas or the 400. Sometimes it's just Shigyapa. So this is not found in Shigyapa, but it is quoted in many earlier texts. Let's say in Haribhadra's, some of you studied Haribhadra's clear meaning commentary when Sangye Khandro taught something about Abhisamaya Alamkara. It's quoted in Haribhadra's clear meaning commentary and other commentaries, and sometimes it says Lukle. What would that mean, Paul? Well, we don't have John to ask. I don't know where John is today here, or Tibetan. What would
yeah, from within the system or like that?
Traditionally in the system. So it doesn't really say where this quote comes from. But it says, you could translate it this way. My translation of the Sputarta, the clear meaning commentary, where this comes up, it says, one thing is the entity of all things. All things are the entity of one thing. Whoever sees the thusness, the emptiness of one thing, they see the thusness of all things. So that's a famous quotation, and it's not attributable to any particular text. A little bit like that statement that we were mulling about that's found in the Dalai Lama's temple wall. Remember, what was that one that we were talking about? Does anyone remember?
Yeah, KT mentioned it, Venerable George. I'm just trying to retrieve it.
Yeah, KT's not here today also. So that was also, we were not able to find that quotation in any of the scriptures, but it says, it is said, traditionally it is said. So it's somehow back in the sort of general sayings of the Buddha, or in the tradition, the commentarial tradition. So what is this talking about? There's a similar translation. There's a similar verse in the 400 stanzas. That's maybe why some people attribute that previous verse to that. And Ruth Sonam's translation of this is in the 8th chapter, the 16th verse of the 8th chapter, or verse 191, about halfway through the text. There's 400 stanzas. So Ruth Sonam's translation says, whatever sees one thing is said to see all. Or you could say, whoever sees one thing is said to see all. What would that mean, Nadine? Without knowing the context, maybe can you guess? Can you give spontaneous commentary to something you don't know the context of? Whoever sees one thing is said to see all.
I think it means, for example, if one understands the selflessness of persons, then one can also understand the selflessness of phenomena.
So yeah, one can understand. It says whatever sees one thing is said to see all. So if you see the emptiness of one thing, let's say the person, that you will see the emptiness of all. So again, we're getting into this territory of whether the emptiness of one thing is the emptiness of all. The second two lines go, that which is the emptiness of one is the emptiness of all. So this is, if you want to go look in the 400 stanzas, if you have the translation of that, let me read what Geshe Zopa said at this time. He said, this is in July 10th, 2002. Wow. Already almost 22 years ago. For example, Geshe said, Deja Ni, that's what's in the first translation, where it's the thing from the tradition, where it said, one thing is the entity of all things are the entity of one thing. Whoever sees the thusness, the Deja Ni of one thing, they see the thusness of all things. It's very similar to Arya Davis thing. So, for example, Geshe said, Deja Ni means shunyata, emptiness. Deja Ni, sometimes we translate it as what? Thusness or something like that. And Ngo Chiki Tengdu, if you understand emptiness of non-inherent existence, the emptiness of inherent existence, then that logic can carry over to everything. Deja Ni means emptiness. Emptiness will be understood the same way, because in order to understand emptiness, you don't need to understand the emptiness of every single entity, every single, what we say, chuchen means subject. Usually when we talk about, one way of talking about phenomena, we say phenomena, some particular phenomena is a chuchen, and its chuni is its attributes, its qualities. This is the holder of having some kind of qualities, and the qualities themselves that are attributed to it are two different things. So you don't have to, in order to understand, once you've understood the emptiness of one thing, as Nadine said, so you understand the emptiness of the person, you can simply bring that understanding, that logic, when you approach other things, like, let's say, the emptiness of phenomena, different than the person. If you understand the emptiness of the person, you can apply that logic to the emptiness of other phenomena. You don't have to analyze again each and every phenomena. That's what's meant by this. Because in order to understand emptiness, you don't need all the individual chuchen, the bases. You don't have to analyze each of them. In order to understand shunyata of every particular thing, you do not have to first understand each of them. And in this context, Geshe quoted, this was what I was trying to dig up this morning, from the first chapter of Pramanavartaka. There's a statement, and Geshe's commentary to it was something like this. When in Tibetan it says seme drotok chusu, so that literally means the way of cutting superimpositions of valid cognition is asserted like lawe chewa tardo dopa, that is asserted to be like the teeth of a deer or a small animal. So what is this talking about? Geshe-la was saying, there is some kind of deer, maybe a musk deer. It has these tiny little teeth, like Geshe-la said, fangs. But so someone was pointing out this morning that usually deers are, what do you call it? Herbivores? Is that the right term?
Yeah, herbivores.
So they don't have big teeth, but they do have some teeth. Chewa means, there are these tiny fangs or teeth, little bit sharp things. Anyway, some kind of animal, they have this very sharp teeth. When they try to cut something like this cloth or something, it has to cut each string one by one. Or if you're talking about mice eating your fisherman's nets, if they're going to eat the net, they have to cut each string individually. Yet, if you had a pair of scissors, let's say, you could cut all of them at one time. Or let's say another example, say for instance, you have a pile of papers that you're putting into a 3-ring binder. Do you know what I'm talking about? A 3-ring binder or a 2-ring binder? So sometimes maybe you have to punch the 2 holes or 3 holes in each sheet of paper, or you can get one of these devices where you put all the sheets of paper in that and you just press once and it gets them all at the same time, right? Follow what I'm saying? So it has each one string you have to cut one by one, rather than like scissors cutting this way. Instead, the animal has to cut each string one by one. That way, to understand a quality like shunyata, emptiness, in order to understand that, you have to understand each particular. If you had to understand each particular thing, then you would have to wait until you were omniscient to realize the emptiness of everything, because you can't realize the shunyata of everything at once. So Geshe-la said, just putting a question in your mind. So this is related to what we were just talking about, right? This is the exact context that Geshe-la brought this up.
Venerable George?
Yes.
Would you like to take your break?
Yeah, let's take a little break for 4 or 5 minutes. If you want to get a cup of tea, relieve yourself. I'll leave my computer unmuted. Unmuted, so it's on, so I can hear you. So if you want to discuss, you can discuss, or you can just space out. I'll be right back. Bye.
kind of would this kind of logic still work in situations like in the double slit experiment in physics, where they were firing the single electron with two slits, but it would create a pattern over time, like it was functioning as a wave?
Yeah, usually they were sending photons, but you can do it with electrons, but usually they send light. So this was when it was understood that the light was composed of individual photons, yet it also exhibited wave-like characteristics, so that when you send the light beam toward this double slit, that is to say, it's opaque, and then there's a little opening where it's clear, and then opaque in the middle, and then clear, and then opaque. So there's two little slits that the light goes through, and that can cause, if you were sending waves through something like that, say waves coming into a harbor where there's two different openings, waves, sort of mini waves, would come from those two openings, and they would have they would interfere with one another, forming a certain kind of pattern, interference pattern. And that's what was exhibited in those experiments. So, yeah, you have to think about it.
As soon as you set up a detector, it's only showing up in one spot.
Yeah, when you have the detector that's picking up the light, that detects the light, very discreetly, individually, you see individual pops of photons coming. So they're coming as individual photons, but they're exhibiting wave-like qualities. So let's just throw that into the mix. We're not going to discuss that right now, but okay. So what we're talking about here is the way that emptiness is realized. So whether the emptiness, we're talking about several things, whether the emptiness of a continuum, whether the emptiness of one moment is different than the emptiness of a later moment. Here the text said, the ultimate nature of a thing's earlier state is itself the ultimate nature of its later state. That is a misconception. So these were misconceptions held by various, not just Samkhya, they're talking about ultimate nature and so forth in different ways, but also certain Buddhists held that. But Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, if you understand these logical arguments that were given earlier well, you can eliminate these wrong views. So this subject is going to come up again several times in the text, and on our discussion on Monday, we'll also talk about it if you have time to attend. Mikhail, what do you think?
Yeah, just to mention that the FPMT translation here for the last sentence we read is a little bit different.
Okay.
It's Jinpa is talking about earlier state and later state.
Right.
While
not too different.
Oh no, it's just sorry, my confusion, my bad.
You might have been reading the wrong line. So Venerable Jones said, if these reasonings are well realized, all the wrong conceptions which assert that all substrata, which means the Chuchen, as opposed to the Chuni. Jinpa just said, view that all phenomena, so he just translates it as phenomena. If these reasonings are well realized, all the wrong conceptions which assert that all substrata are mutually different entities, they're different, the horse and the mule and the cup and the vase and the flower, they're different entities, and yet their realities are one in being over there and over here. This was a term I mentioned before that we can't seem to find the Sanskrit of in the Samkhya philosophy, but in the Tibetan rendition of the Samkhya philosophy, when we talk about Paryin Suryan, Geshe Zopa explained that means what's over there is the same as what's over here. It's sort of like a way of saying everything is of the same nature. There's no difference of the nature over there and the nature over here. Okay, so she puts that literally in her translation. Jimpa doesn't translate it. All the realities are one in being over there and over here, and those that assert the reality of the time of a previous state, the reality that means the ultimate nature of a previous state to be the reality at the time of a later state, all of those misconceptions will be averted. So that's more or less the same translation that we have, except a little more detail, a little more literally what was said there. Okay. So let's continue. Now we're on the next outline, getting near the end. Maybe we'll finish today. Who knows? The self-generation. So this outline says, demonstrating that there is no self-arising, no dakke, even on the conventional level from a perspective unaffected by philosophical views. So when you're just talking to ordinary people, housewives, truck drivers, manicurists, grocery store attendants, Wall Street executives that don't have whose minds are not affected by different philosophical views, how they just look at the world, or as Venerable Jones' translation says, indicating, then in parentheses, production from self as non-existent even for the conventions of those whose minds have not been affected by tenets, or Jimpa says philosophical views, so we say drupta. So Jimpa's translation says, having thus refuted self-arising, that self-arising that's postulated by the Samkhya system, which claims to contemplate the ultimate nature of reality. It claims to do that. A system that is at odds with the Buddhist way. Having refuted that Samkhya view, the following is now stated to show that even from the perspective of worldly convention, so this is an important thing. We've talked about it before. We haven't always used the same terminology. Remember the example of the blacksmith when asked whose horse that is over in the corner. They says, "Oh, that's my horse," or "Where's your horse?" "It's my horse," without necessarily thinking about inherently existent horse or not inherently existent horse, just from the worldly perspective. The following is now stated to show that even from the perspective of worldly convention, not trained in any philosophical tradition, it is incorrect to conceive of self-arising. Does that make sense? The words? So the verse now is the first two lines of verse 612. So in Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Karikas, just as root verses, this is the root verses of the 6th chapter, the 12th verse, or the first two lines of it. Because the effect can be seen when the cause is no more, because an effect can be seen when the cause is no more, even ordinary people do not accept that the two, cause and effect, are one. Makes sense, right? Anna, you're nodding. It's easy to understand, right?
On conventional level, yes.
Yeah, okay, that's good enough. Mikhail?
Yeah, I think so. I'm still wondering why he's saying now in this topic a heading, even on the conventional level. Just it's as if he were saying that we refuted it on the ultimate level. Now we're refuting on the conventional level.
So Venerable Jones says, even for the conventions of those minds who have not been affected by tenets. So here, this is now the even is not talking about the ultimate level and the conventional level. It's talking about whether you're talking about people who are holding philosophical views, like the Samkhya view or the Buddhist view or the other, the other Vedic views besides the Samkhya, or among even the Buddhists, they have all these different views. So not putting all those people aside, even people who are not affected by those views, they don't accept self-generation, self-arisal. That's what it's talking about here.
Okay.
So commentary to that. Thupten Jinpa's translation says, because the effect can be seen when the cause, the seed, is no more, right? Even ordinary people do not accept that the seed and the sprout, the two, are one. Say that. What say? I can't remember the street talk. What did you say? Because the effect can be seen when the cause is no more, when the seed is no longer existent, even ordinary people do not say, they do not accept that the seed and the sprout are one. Because you can see one when the other one has disappeared. So if they were one, you wouldn't see that. Right? One sense easy. Doris, what do you think? There are no double negatives in that, are there? You following? Okay. Your thumb didn't bring up that big rain that mine somehow brought up before. Diana, are you following? Making sense? Yeah. Yes.
Except I will just, this is, I'm cavilling. I'm thinking about a very small point. It's everything it says there is accurate, but I would not generally use most people's unthinking perceptions.
I'm not saying unthinking.
Okay. People who do not have a particular philosophy and by implication have not thought critically about forming opinions on the basis of what they perceive.
Even there, not necessarily. No. It's just talking about people who aren't affected by the idea, some philosophical view that the nature pervades the
one
seed.
of the things I mean by a philosophical view.
Yeah.
In any case, it's a research professor of mine had a sign on his wall that said, "Common sense is that faculty which tells us the earth is flat."
Right.
So I wouldn't kind of appeal to people's common sense to look at the nature of reality.
Right. But so that common sense is different here. So from the, what did we say here? From a perspective unaffected by philosophical views. So that doesn't mean common sense that can be, the common sense that would think, oh yeah, the earth is flat, because we're talking about from the perspective of the world, there is a correct conventional truth and an incorrect conventional truth, right? The face, your face in the mirror, reflected in the mirror, is known to be a falsity in the world, right? And so you could extend that now even though in the Abhidharma it seems to imply, Abhidharma Kosha seemed to say the earth was flat, and some other systems say that flat, still from the correct conventional view of the world, now the world is spherical, right? It's not, because you can go up. No, Sean is not a spherical. If you go up in an airplane, you can see the curve. Go on, say.
It's a spheroid. It's not an exact sphere.
Okay, yeah. Spherical. I'm using it kind of like in general. Yeah, they're bulging at the equator, truncated at the poles, and so forth. Okay, so let's go on the next section. So summarizing the essential points of these refutations. The second two lines of verse 612. Thus, the postulation that things originate from themselves is untenable in reality as well as everyday experience. Or as Venerable Jones said, therefore, thoroughly imputing things arise from self is not appropriate to either thusness or the worldly. So how does one talk about that? So since self-arising, self-generation, dakkye, is contrary to reason both on the ultimate level and on the level of worldly conventional truth, this postulation, not sure what he's saying there. For this reason, according to both sides of the ultimate and of the worldly production from self contradicts reasoning. Therefore, thoroughly imputing, I think that's what he's translating as postulation. So the imputation that outer and inner things originate from themselves is untenable in reality. In other words, is untenable in ultimate truth, as well as in everyday experience of the world. Because of this, when the noble Nagarjuna refutes self-arising, he does not qualify it in terms of ultimately or conventionally. He refutes it in general using the phrase, not from itself. So when the master Bhavaviveka applies the proviso ultimately in his syllogism, and the syllogism that's being quoted here from Bhavaviveka's, remember Bhavaviveka was criticizing Buddhapalita, and he said you should have had a syllogism like this. Things do not arise from themselves ultimately, he puts the word ultimately in there, because they are existence, like, for example, sentient beings. We should understand that such a qualification is in fact pointless. So again, and first reading might sound, like, what? What? Say, now I remember, say what? I'm not sure where that comes from. Have you ever heard that expression? Say what? I'm not sure where that comes from. Does anyone know?
I live in Baltimore, and you hear that phrase a lot. What? What?
Yeah, what? Yeah, what? Or say what? I don't know where the say comes in there. Say what? What are you saying? So let's see if we can get to the bottom of what this is talking about here. Let me see. So Venerable Joan, I think we read this already. For this reason, according to both the sides of ultimate and of worldly conventionalities, production from self contradicts reasoning. Therefore, thoroughly imputing outer and inner things arise from themselves is not appropriate with respect to either thusness, the ultimate, or worldly conventionalities. Therefore, this is from Venerable Jones' translation, the FPMT translation. Therefore, Arya Nagarjuna in refuting production from self does not apply the qualification ultimately as Bhavaviveka did in trying to explain Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna himself doesn't use ultimately in talking about the four kinds of production. He just says things are not produced from self, from other, from both, from neither. He doesn't say ultimately anywhere there. But refutes production from self in general, saying not from self, ... not from other. Then Arya Bhavaviveka made a distinction saying things are not ultimately produced from self because of existing, like the possessor of mind. How did Jimpa translate that? For example, sentient beings. So he translated possessor of mind as sentient being. The Tibetan says, let's say, lobong legden chegi, ngoponam ni dondambar takle kewa mayinte. They are not produced from themselves. Yopechir, because they exist, sempa chen shino, not semchen, but sempa chen, like having mind. So sempa chen is a little different than semchen. So we'd have to go back and look at Bhavaviveka's statement. We'll do that on Monday. It was just sort of to go a little into that. For example, we should understand that such a qualification, which is in fact pointless. So Jimpa's note 374, he's just quoting Bhavaviveka's lamp of wisdom, the Prajna Pradipa. So we'll talk about that a little in our discussion group. So yeah, that distinction, remember we said that on the even on the conventional level, you don't have to invoke ultimate, you don't have to use the word ultimately in refuting production from self, production from both, or production causelessly. But what about production from other? Because the Prasangika does agree that there is production from other. Don't you have to invoke the word ultimately there? Mikhail, have you studied this?
Conventional production from other is accepted, yeah. So
right. So why doesn't so if we were to take what was being said here literally, you would say that you don't have to say that. Or let's say if you said that production from others is refuted, that would seem to imply that you have no conventional production from others.
yeah, for that
you
statement,
use the word ultimately. Go on.
yeah,
Sorry.
you would need to add the qualifier here, ultimately.
Yeah. So
from other is
even there, you don't need to add the qualifier ultimately. And we brought this up once before. Lama Tsong Khapa mentions later, and Geshe Zopa, when he was teaching us, he pounded it into our head, this particular statement, if you want. Or maybe he poured into our ears gently the nectar rather than pounded into our ears, however you want to think of it, that the Shenke ni, that means production from others, Shenle kewa, Shenke is short for that, means production from inherently existent others. Just Shenke itself, just other production itself implies production from inherently existent others. You don't have to add ultimately in there, because already you're already talking about something which is inherently different. So what that means becomes a little more clear as we go along when we start to talk about, which is the very next section, we'll start production from others. So just leave that marinate in your mind. There's a lot of things that are percolating, kind of like yeast culture, you know, your sourdough culture sort of bubbling there in your mind. It's not quite gelled yet. So we'll address that. Let's go to this last section. Maybe we have time to do this. Refuting self-arising through fundamental wisdom's reasoning. Wasn't all of this fundamental wisdom's reasoning done that we did before?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, Venerable.
The reasonings refuting self-production, self-arising, self-generation, that we just refuted so many pages, headaches. Wasn't that from fundamental wisdom, Nagarjuna's text, those reasonings?
Yes, I think it was.
Indirectly, but not, they were from Chandrakirti's own presentation. You can find that somewhere in fundamental wisdom, but it's not explicit, the reasonings. Now, the particular reasonings that Nagarjuna used to refute self-reduction. Okay, so it's not going to be verse 1 of fundamental wisdom. It comes a little bit later when he's actually refuting production from self. So first of all, this is verse 613 in Chandrakirti. So Chandrakirti gave his own reasonings. Now he's giving Nagarjuna's reasonings to refute self-arising, self-generation. If you assert self-arising, the produced and that which produces, as well as the act and the agent, will become identical. So there's a mistranslation there. It should be the act and the object rather than the act and the agent, but we'll go through that again. They will become identical. Since these are not the same, we reject self-arising, for it entails the unwanted consequences explained at length. What was that again? If you assert self-arising, the produced and that which produces would be identical. So what does that mean? What is the producer? Let's say if you talk about different things, you can talk about the seed and the sprout, or you can talk about the potter and the pot. Let's say that, the potter and the pot. What is the producer with respect to the potter and the pot, Nadine?
And the potter is the producer.
And what is the produced?
The pot.
Yeah, that which is produced is a pot. So if you assert self-arising, the produced and that which produces, or let's say the producer and that produced would be identical. So that's obviously not this case, right? The potter is not identical to that which he or she produces. Or also the act and the agent, Jimpa says, actually should say the action and the object acted upon would become identical. So what does that mean? Like say in the case of fire, which was going to be explicitly explained in just a couple of paragraphs. In the case of fire, oh wait, let me just read the commentary there. So there are other faults as well. If you assert self-arising for effects, That means effects arise from something that existed in their cause. The produced, the effect, and that which produces its cause, as well as the act being done and the agent that does the act, will become identical. Since they are not the same, we should reject self-arising. Because, to assert self-arising, to assert it, would entail many of the unwanted consequences explained at length in this text previously, as well as in fundamental wisdom. For example, with respect to the first fault, fundamental wisdom states that cause and effect are one, can never be tenable, can never be correct. For if causes and effects are one, if they're identical, the product, the produced and the producer would be one. That's what we just talked about that. So that note 375 just refers back to Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. So the commentary says, so if the cause and the effect have identical natures, this is saying, then the Father and the Son, what does that mean, Father and the Son? Don, why is it talking about Father and Son here would become one?
Producer and produced, I guess, would become one.
Yeah, so the Father is the producer of the Son. Well, also the Mother must be also, right? But here, the Father and the Son, or the I and its consciousness will become one. Suvash, what's talked about there? The I and its consciousness.
Because when the three things come into contact, then the consciousness arises. Therefore, the consciousness is the produced, and the I is what is producing the consciousness.
The I or what?
Well, I mean, the object, the I faculty, and the consciousness, all of the three coming into contact.
Right. So here, when it says I, let's see. Gyudengo chikna padang budak gam mikdang denam she. So I, that would mean the I faculty and its consciousness. So it's taking just the I faculty as being a cause of the I consciousness. There are two other causes, two other cooperative conditions, as you say also. So with respect to the second fault, remember what the second fault was here. What was the second one? The act and the agent, Jimpa said. And I said that should say the act and its object. With respect to the second fault, fundamental wisdom says, if the fuel were identical with the fire, remember we talked about this before. Say, for instance, you're looking at a campfire and the fire seems to be permeating the wood, right? If the fuel were identical with the fire, what's the fuel? Let's say the wood, the firewood, or if you're talking about a gas fire, like in the movies, big explosion, it looks like the fuel that you saw just a moment ago when the evil guy was clicking his lighter, tossing it into the gasoline that's leaking from the car. You know what I'm talking about? One of these scenarios. And so the fire goes to the car and it all explodes. So it's as though the fuel and the fire are one, right? If the fuel were identical with the fire, Jimpa translates, the agent and the act would be one. It should be the agent and the object acted upon would be one. So when we talk about jache lesum, Do you remember that expression, Richard? Jache lesum. So chawa means action, or the act. J is short for chepapo, which means agent. And lay refers to that which is acted upon. Lay usually means karma, or sometimes you might think action, but it actually means grammatically, as Mikhail knows, right? Mikhail, you said you studied this in your grammar also, jache lesum. Lay means that which is acted upon. So you always have, you can always find an action, an agent, and something that's acted upon. So in the case of fire, burning fuel, burning is the action, right? The agent, that which causes the burning, is the fire, and the fuel is that which is acted upon, right? That which is burned, let's say. So in this sentence, the agent and the object acted upon are what are being talked about. We're ignoring the action of burning. Okay. So if the fuel were identical with the fire is the agent, the fuel is that which is acted upon. The agent and the object acted upon would become one. I'm correcting Jimpa's text here. He says the agent and the act would become one. When refuted thus, the opponent might respond by saying, if the consequence leveled is, are the father and his son and the agent and the object, I'm changing Jimpa's translation there, are the father and his son, that's the producer and the produced, and the agent and the object acted upon identical, are they identical in their natures? The answer is yes. This is the opponent, not the Prasangika view. Yes, I agree. But if the consequence leveled, are they identical in general? The answer would be no. There is no such consequence. There's no such pervasion. There's no such entailment. Nonetheless, because of the reasoning that forces the consequence, that if two things are identical in nature, as asserted in this manner characterized above, their manifestations would also be identical. That's what we were arguing before, right? If they were identical in nature, their manifestations would have to be identical. The opponent cannot avoid the above stated faults. Therefore, because of the pitfalls exposed thus far, because of the errors exposed thus far, those who wish to realize the two truths without distortion, according to the Prasangika view, they must not subscribe, they should not take up the notion of self-arising, such as the Samkhya's. And then he says, so we are advised. The implication is, this is Lama Tsongkhapa's text, right? So it's not saying Lama Tsongkhapa is advising, but let's see here. This Venerable Joan translate. She just says you should definitely assert that there is no production from the self. Furthermore, logically speaking, existence and non-existence of self-arising are direct opposites, right? When we talk about direct opposites, one will imply the other. The absence of one implies the other. If things are either existent or non-existent, right? Is there a third alternative? Or a fourth alternative? What do you think, Don? Between existence and non-existence?
I don't think so, unless you want to get into imaginaries.
Okay, imaginary numbers or whatever. So they are direct opposites. What's another term for that, Paul?
Another term for which, Venerable George?
Direct opposites, mutually exclusive.
Mutually exclusive, yes.
Yeah, okay. So they are mutually exclusive. So if it's not one, it has to be the other. So furthermore, logically speaking, existence and non-existence of self-generation, self-arising, are mutually exclusive, direct opposites, observing the law of the excluded middle. What does that mean? I think Diana might know. Did you study logic somewhere? The excluded middle, what is this talking about?
I think it only means that if we've defined this as mutually exclusive, then by definition, there's no in-between state. There's two states, and it's one or the other, but it can't be some kind of fuzzy place in the middle. It's not a continuum, it's binary.
Right. Right. So I'm just trying to see in Venerable Jones' translation, fearing the above, there is no provision. What did she say? If the consequences stated that the pair's father, son, and action agent are one entity, I accept. This is the Samkhya view. But if the consequences is stated that they are one in general, the response is there's no pervasion. However, if they are, that would be the Samkhya position. However, if they are asserted as one nature in accordance with the previous explanations, the reasoning that is able to impel even the transformations as being one cannot be abandoned. In other words, it would follow that if they're the one in nature, their transformations would have to be one, have to be identical also. Those were the sort of absurd consequences we talked about before. In regard to Chandrakirti's statement, quote, therefore, fearing the above-mentioned faults and wishing to realize unerringly the two truths, do not assert production from self. So that's Venerable's translation of Chimpa's saying, what was it he was saying here? So we are advised. So it's actually referring to Chandrakirti's statement. Therefore, fearing the above-mentioned faults and wishing to realize unerringly the two truths, do not assert production from self. That's a statement of Chandrakirti's. Since existence and non-existence of production from self are also a direct contradiction, wherein excluding one, for instance, it being non-existent, the other of the pair is established, you should definitely assert that there is no production from self. Okay. So we've been putting on the first layer of primer in our mind about this subject. A lot of different things we've talked about. We'll be coming back to them later, especially in Monday discussion group. But now we've finished the refutation of production from self. And now we're about to begin in our next class, this next outline, refuting production from other, or as Chimpa says, refuting arising from other, Shenke. So what do you think? We still have to sort of review this a little bit in our mind, especially this Jache Lesum, right? The Ja Che Lesum, Ja refers to Jawa action. J is short for Chepapo, the agent or the producer. And Le means the Jasulewa, the object that is acted upon. So the action, the agent, and the object will always have that kind of thing. Like when you're chopping a tree, there are two agents in a sense. There is the axe. There is, say, the primary agent is the person, the axe person, rather than saying the axeman, the axe woman, the chopper. Then also agent, you can call subsidiary agent or direct agent, is the axe itself. That can be called the instrument. That falls under agent. The action is cutting or chopping, right? That's the action. And that which is acted upon is so let's say the tree. If you're chopping a tree, if you're cutting a tree, or if you're chopping firewood, the object acted upon is that log that you're trying to chop up into smaller pieces to put into your fireplace. Does anyone have wood fire in their house? None of you? I was going to say, I just had a poplar tree chopped down at my place. You're welcome to come and pick up the pieces. Okay, so we're going to begin production from others next time. Any last questions before we go? Everything clear?
Venerable George, just a point of scheduling. I think this is the end of this unit, correct? I believe.
This is the fourth class of 8.
Oh, okay. Perhaps I'm wrong then. I thought this
Yeah,
was.
this is the fourth class of 8. So we still have 4 more.
Oh, okay.
The midpoint.
Got it. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I misread the calendar. Never mind.
Right. So kitty cat, thank you. Your tail around Paul's neck there. Anyone have a question? So on Monday, we'll talk more about these various questions that came up today. We'll do a little review the next class, but then we're going to go into other production. So if you get a chance to review what we've read, read ahead, and let's dedicate our merits before we finish. Because at the beginning, important thing is the motivation. In the middle, to have concentration and to do whatever action you're doing well. I think a little further down probably is the dedications. After that, there we go, dedication. And then at the end, dedication. So the 3 important points, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Sort of like the famous prayer of Lama Khapa. Due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. May I, when it says attain, Drup, may I quickly actualize being a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators, all wandering beings without exception into that enlightened state. So this encapsulates all of the essential elements. So recognizing in order to lead sentient beings into that state of enlightenment, we ourselves have to quickly become a Guru Buddha. So it says, Lama Sangye Drupgyurne. It doesn't say quickly there in the Tibetan, but that can be understood. So we have 2 aims. One is to achieve enlightenment, and one is to be able to benefit sentient beings thereby. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has not arisen, may that which has arisen already not diminish, but increase more and more. fearless teacher and assembly of children of the conquerors, you Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, conqueror Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, so 2 ways to uphold the teachings, through your, we say, lungtok, through the explanation, through the oral transmissions and explanations, and through our actual practice, making the realizations. In upholding the Muni's precious, complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged, meditating on difficult subjects, chewing the dry bones. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and mother sentient beings exclusively, you suddenly departed to peace. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem and the great waves of bodhicitta of the Bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. To our gurus, all of our gurus, the Dalai Lamas, the Serkon Rinpoches, and so forth, you who are my eyes to view all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for we fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, skill and means, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, please live long and stable lives. So last, I guess Anna has a comment? No? You had your hand up? Nothing.
I'm not sure how that happened. I must have accidentally hit that. Sorry, Venerable.
Okay, no problem, no problem. So thanks for being here, spending this time. I think there's going to be a Tara Puja later, right? Does anyone know? So in case you want to join at Shantideva Center, that Tenzin Zopa, Geshe Tenzin Zopa is going to be officiating at. So look forward to seeing you, some of you on Monday, hopefully all of you and more next Saturday. Take care. Be well.
Thank you, Venerable George.
See you. Thank you for attending. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Venerable George.
Thank you.
Hey, Doris.
Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.